Hello, everyone. We're here with episode number 3 with Lucy Faulconer. So, Lucy, you had some idea for the topic today, yeah? So, we were having a brief conversation about it. I'll let you say hello and then create the context for the conversation today.
Thank you, Ashkan. It's good to be here again. And the topic for today is one that I come across a lot, myself in my coaching, but also with the community of coaches we work with. And it is, when is it worth to voice our concerns and our opinions? And when is it worth it to stay quiet?
Mm,
I have my opinion around it. And one of the things that is really important for me in this is that
mm,
we can never know the consequences, like the exact consequences of what is going to happen when we do say our opinion, voice our concerns, and
mm.
how people are going to take it, what's the ripple effect that it's going to have. What comes up for you with this?
Yeah. Okay. See, let's just start here. Um, there is a nature to communication. Yeah. So this is a kind of axiomatic fact, law. Um, you want to say something, you intend to say something, and it depends on your articulation ability and how you can actually put it in words and convey that point. Then you end up saying something, and then the audience who's basically receiving what you have just said, they're going to receive it, they're going to understand it or interpret it in a way that it works for them. Yeah, it depends on their existing intellectual substrate, how they perceive content in the word. Yeah, the content is coming out of your mouth, and then they're going to receive it based on multiple different layers of their upbringing, their experiences, what sort of things is triggering to them. Um, how the religion that they subscribe to may influence them, the cultural factors, and so many other variables um, that they exist. Yeah. So basically, what we're saying is, you intend to say something, you end up saying something, and there's a gap, and then there's another gap in what you ended up saying and what's going to be finally received. Depends on your audience. So if you aggregate these two pieces of gaps, then there's going to be a huge gap. So just to start, I wanted to bring our attention to this very nature of communication. Yeah. Now, if we acknowledge that and we know that we're vulnerable to that and live life from that viewpoint, not thinking arrogantly that no, I'm so clear in what I'm going to say, and it's the people's responsibility to exactly understand what I have to say. I mean, that's a little bit unrealistic, yeah? So if you're living life from that viewpoint, that already makes us humble.
Mm.
We know that that vulnerability is there, and we can embrace it, and 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 also it brings a level of responsibility. You know, as you said, you never can exactly work out or predict the consequences or the outcomes that what you're about to communicate is going to have. Yeah. So this would put us in this kind of a edge. Like we're going to be on our toes, in such a way that, of course, you feel compelled sometimes to say something, to voice something out. At the same time, then you want to be considerate. Now, if you radically fall from the cliff from this side, then you may have this urge to say whatever comes to your mouth. You're going to spit it out into people's faces, and or like on the other side, if you tilt towards that other radical end, then you may be quite afraid of or scared in going through all of these dilemmas and going through all these hesitations and doubts, and you're not going to be confident to actually say what's there for you, and that has its own consequences. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you've just touched on two key elements for me. One
Hmm.
is the context, like the environment that you're in, and
mm,
that can give you light into, well, how maybe the information that you're
mm,
sharing, the things
yeah,
that you're saying are going to be received. But the other side of this is the internal conversation that we have with ourselves.
mm,
So does it keep us on our toes? Do we have that awareness to understand that context and say, okay, I should actually stop here
yeah,
and stay quiet? That's the wise decision.
yeah,
And where might it be that it is actually our fears, our anxieties, our lack of confidence
mm,
getting in the way of us saying something that could actually be a huge contribution to that
mm,
environment, to that context, to that person that you've got in front of you?
mm,
Um,
mm,
so understanding um, what is guiding us to say speak up, and what is maybe stopping us from speaking up. Is it internal,
mm.
or is it actually the context, or combination of the two of them?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's an art at the end of the day. So there's no straight answer. Yeah, like there's no tangible, like a step by step guideline in. We cannot. I mean, like, create policies around what exactly to be said and what exactly not to be said. I mean, if you look in the media, for example, like they have their editorial policies. You know, so for example, if you take Fox News, or if you take like CNNs, and you have all different um, media, and they all have their editorial policies. Like they try to control what is being said, and what's not, the tone of the language, etc., etc. I mean, like you can put all those things in place, even at an individual level. But I mean, at the end of the day, there is this practical element to the need of saying what's there for you in one way or
Yeah.
another. Yeah. And also, on the other side, I can even go to, if you look into it from another angle, is like I would say that we have moral obligation to actually say what's there for us. Yeah, that's part of our authenticity at the end of the day. It's not about the matter of like whether you say it in general or not. I think that you need to communicate what's there for you at the end of the day. It's not about
Mhm.
that. Yeah, I think it's quite healthy for us to communicate what's there for us, like in our personal relationships, our intimate relationship, in the family setting, in at work. No matter if you're working with your colleagues and there are things for you to be communicated to the team, or even when it comes to authorities, like for example, it comes to your relationship with your manager, the leader of the organization, or like in a societal, I mean, if you want to see it in society, then there are mechanisms in place, at least in modern societies, that you have the representatives of people, at least in theory, that at the end of the day you should have access to the member of parliaments, let's say, and then you need to voice out what's there for you, and then mechanisms for it. So there seems to be consensus, at least in part, that it's extremely healthy and crucial for us to voice out what's there for us. Yeah, and that's why in certain countries we have freedom of speech or freedom of expression being embedded in the constitution. So it's a not negotiable right for citizens. Now, how well that is being implemented or not, and that's a separate conversation. Yeah, so therefore, we can acknowledge that there is this consensus in part that we know that that's important. Yeah, that's what we want. That's what we care about. We know that that's healthy. Now, therefore, the conversation is not that. The conversation perhaps is how to communicate it effectively, or like to what extent we need to be considerate and consider the context in which then you are communicating certain things. Yeah. Now, there, we often talk about this thing called common sense. Now, the thing with common sense is, I
It's not
mean,
that
yeah, it's not that common. Yeah, it's not that common, especially like if you're living in more modern societies, that multiculturalism you know, is a major discourse. You have people from multiple different cultures living together, or even within a culture. It's not like in societies that they didn't embrace multiculturalism as much as certain other countries. At the end of the day, like it's not the citizens are not exactly the same in the way that they think, in the way that they relate to all there is in that society. Yeah. Similarly, in organizations and teams, and is the same. So you cannot have people assimilate, like become identical. That's what you don't want. Yeah. So you want true diversity, and it's not like a kind of an agenda. I'm not talking about diversity as an agenda. I'm looking into it from an ontological perspective. Like we are diverse in our preferences, at least. Yeah, in the way that we relate to a word and all in it. We have different word views. We have different intellectual substrate that we build our opinions or beliefs and conceptions of various different things in reality. So therefore, I'm not saying how it should be. I'm saying that my observation is telling me how it is. Yeah, at least from my viewpoint. So
Let me just add one question there to what
sure.
you said, because is it our responsibility not to offend people with
Oh,
what I say?
that's a very good question. Well, no, it's not your responsibility. Yeah, but there's a massive but there. See, it's my responsibility not to be offended. Now,
Okay.
when I say responsibility, I don't mean a kind of an obligation, a duty, a burden you need to shoulder. I mean being responsible. Like you have autonomy. See, if someone is doing something that you may find offensive, it's better to leave life from this viewpoint that you're going to put focus on what you have control over.
Mm.
I can have way more control over how I'm going to respond to an offensive, what I perceive as offensive, rather than me wanting to change the other person's behavior or the way that they are talking to me so that then I don't get offended. The problem with that is if you do that, if we discussed that before, like when you put the blame, when you put the you know responsibility, then you are putting the power. So if
Mhm.
you want to place power on your end as a leader, as a person who's being a leader in their lives, you want to have massive level of influence and control on how you respond to the matters that life brings to you, regardless of the source. You want to be the primary source. You want to be the primary cause. Yeah. So that's basically
Mm.
what we discuss in responsibility. So therefore, it's not. I'm not seeing it from an altruistic perspective or moral perspective, saying that of course it's very good to live in a society or in a team that no one is going to talk in a way that I'm going to get offended. But I mean, how arrogant that can be for us to actually think that everyone else should behave in certain ways so that I don't get offended. Yeah.
Well,
Mm.
we do hear a lot of that though.
Of course.
Um,
Yes.
and I've been exposed many times to people, for example, in the conversation around giving people feedback,
Yeah.
that, well, you're making me feel unsafe, for example, or
Mm.
exposed when you give me feedback around something. And I always think, well, what do you prefer, for me not to say something so that you can stay comfortable and not
Mm-hmm.
challenged or confronted by something that you're doing or not doing that actually is having an impact on
Mm-hmm.
others? But then I reflect back to what you said a few minutes ago around the agreements that we have.
Yeah.
So, how do we create agreements in the environments that we're in or the relationships that we're in? For example, with my family, with my work colleagues, um,
Mm.
around how are we going to voice our opinions, our concerns, our feedback in a way that we we agree that's going to be constructive and
Yeah.
maybe confronting. But if I see something, I can say it, and I have full permission to be able to show you something that maybe you're not seeing, or a concern that I have, or an
Mm.
opinion that I have that you might not necessarily agree with or like necessarily.
Yeah. Yes, yes. See, that's exactly why I said that it's an art. Yeah. At the end of the day, yeah, we can definitely. I'll get to the point like when we'll discuss the agreements and then the settings that you are having communications going on. Yeah. So, for example, like if you're going to talk about coaching agreements, or we're talking about your relationship with your friend, how close you are,
Mm.
what is the history to your relationship, to what extent you have implicitly or explicitly gave each other permission to actually give feedback. Yeah, so we can talk about it. But I want to add a bit more on this thing that I said, that it's an art. um, See, at the end of the day, if you want to take a bit more conservative approach around this. So when we say conservative, I'm not saying it in a political sense. Being conservative in that is in your communication is like, see, I observe the world, I observe my surroundings, I observe all different people around me, the people I so love, the people that I have problem with, the people that they may be considered my competitors, the people that I have harsh history with, yeah, and all these different people. Now, how many problems that you may be able to see in your observations and interactions with everyone else around you? Just give me a number.
So many. I don't know.
There's so many, yeah, like it's like countless. If you want to
Countless.
be sensitive enough, and if you have an equipped eyes, then you can find so many problem that exist both internally, like you can identify your shadow parts, your troubled side, the parts that are not actually working for you. And similarly, like you can see the problems, you can perceive problems in others. Now,
Mm.
often we tend to look outward more and see the problems in others, in what they say and how they behave, more than we look inward. Like that's human tendency, apparently. But
Yeah.
so there are countless number of problems. Now, the question is, are you so obligated, or you feel compelled that much that you need to address all of these problems as they come up all the time? Because life is not all about that. Like life is not all about, okay, so let's like perfect everyone. Yeah. So if
Mm.
I see anything, like I need to talk about it, I need to bring it up. So therefore, the conservative view around that is, no, well, there are so many things that we can address, so many things to be said, so many problems in the world, so many problems in our relationship, so many. But do I need to address them all at once? So, and that goes back to the art. Well, no, look, you need to develop this, um, develop your conception that they can propel you to make the decisions in prioritizing which ones are the most crucial ones in the context that matters. Yeah. So you're going to look into, okay, so we're building this relationship, this intimate relationship, or I'm building this relationship with my colleague. I'm a new person in this team, for example, and I can observe certain things that doesn't work. Now, we just need to slow it down a little bit, observe, try to understand, try to give benefit of doubt on everything, and then if you see that something that it's not really working for you with high frequencies happening, then that's the time that you go, okay, so like there are 10 different things that I can see, but this one I'm prioritizing over those other nine. And then go, okay,
Yeah.
so this is the time I think that I need to have an assertive conversation with this person. So that's one of the biggest thing, because like if you want to critically look into everything, and instead of us addressing these problems, um, and transforming our conception, their conception, supporting them to transform their conceptions, and hence it may transform our behaviors or their behaviors. We want to revolutionize things. Yeah, we want to just fix it all in one go, and that's very unrealistic. And
Yeah.
and often what happens here is a very important piece of it. Often what happens is, like, maybe it depends on your articulation ability and how you can be assertive in your communication. Let's assume that you defeated that person. Yeah, you verbally defeated that person. guess what? You're going to be being in relationship with this person who is defeated.
How's that going to?
They may find you being right. Yeah. So see, like you may have this urge to be right, to be righteous. And let's assume this other person is convinced intellectually that, yeah, you were right. But if you keep doing that, you're going to be in a relationship with a person who feels defeated. And that's not going to work. And so let's say that may lead to humiliation, that may lead to them feeling ashamed, thinking that they're not good enough, and at the end of the day, you're going to risk losing that relationship.
Well, that reminds me of an example of a coaching conversation I had
Mm,
a couple of weeks ago, where the person was saying, "I can see so many areas this person needs to address, and
yeah.
that are creating a problem with my team.
Mm,
But then I worry that every time I have a conversation with them, all I do is tell them what they're doing wrong and
mm,
what I need them to change."
yeah.
So I come across as someone that is constantly putting them down.
Mm,
Do I come across as someone just really picky that gets
mm,
is getting like back at them around everything that they're doing?
yeah.
Um, and the question that we ask is, well, what do you care about? What's a relationship that you want to build with that person?
Yes.
And you telling them everything they need to change, is that in the service of that relationship? And that's what
Yeah.
shifted
Yeah.
it, or gave her clarity at least
Mm,
around where that inner compass was for when to speak up and when to say,
yeah.
okay, I'm just going to let that one go, because in this big scheme of things,
Yeah.
in this relationship, it's not really that important.
Yes. And see, if you're in a relationship with a person who is so off, like from that image that you have, or where you think that you are at your self image, perhaps you are in a wrong relationship. Because see, this is what we do as human beings. Yeah, we go to a relationship, even if it's a very short relationship. Like, I'm not necessarily talking about your intimate partner, or even if it's like you have an agreement with someone to be your tutor, learning something, or any of the interactions that we have in social settings, or um, at work, or so. And the thing is, like, we may metaphorically marry the the future version of that person, or what we project on them, like what we want them to be. Yeah. So okay, yeah, I see that there is this problem, but I know that this person will fix them. Yeah, will fix them. And then we are in relationship with that massive hope that they're going to turn to what we wanted. But a more realistic approach is, no, going, no, see, this person is this. I can observe these things, and I may be right about my assessment. Now, do I still value being in relationship with this person as she is or as he is? If the answer is yes, then the rest of it, yeah, you go, I have the base that I want to have with this person. Now, the rest of it, we're going to build it, and we're going to go through all these communications and everything. And obviously, as you said, like the next part of it is like agreements. Yeah. So
Yeah.
no, I'm not saying that we need to be sitting there, like, for example, in a romantic relationship. If you want, then start like getting consent every time on everything, like as it's being proposed actually by certain even politicians, that we need to create an app creating a chronology of all of these consent, like, can I do this, can I do that? That's a separate conversation. Yeah. So I'll go before that, like, what kind of a relationship you are in, or how do you guys relate to relationship? But in one way or another, you need to create those conversations as you build the relationship, so that you know what sort of permissions in general you're giving each other, so that there's not much misunderstanding. Now, for example, like, if you're building a relationship with a business partner, with a life partner, and then you go in with the approach of thriving, growth. Yeah. Then embedded in that conversation, that, oh, we want to be together, we want to own each other's shadows. Yeah. So you have your shadows, and this person has their shadows, and you're owning that, without resentment. That's a very with grace. It's like, of course, it's not all the the positive side to this person. Everyone has flaws. Everyone has um, trouble sides. Yeah, and everyone has uh, a degree of care regarding their growth in life, and that you want to be on the same page. You want to be compatible in that regard. Now, so if you are choosing to go about your relationship uh, from the viewpoint of growth, then embedded in that sits quite comfortably um, this idea that we need to identify the trouble sides, because unless you identify the trouble parts, the parts that are not working, whether it's in me, in you, or in the relationship as the third entity, then what else we're going to address so that then we grow? What growth means then? Yeah, of course, we need to be vulnerable enough, open enough, and have effective um, channels of communications and trust, so that then we can pinpoint each other's problems that we may be blind to them. But if that conversation is not there and it's not being reiterated and it's not being recommitted as we go, all of a sudden, when and if it's not being communicated effectively, yeah, it's like you're complaining and you're blaming. That's not what we're talking about. Like bringing the attention of that person to certain things they may not see or may see differently to the way that you see it. So you share these perceptions, and that can lead to constructive results. Yeah, but this is the thing. Like the relationship, like any other thing, is to be built. But often we are in this fantasy that, oh, like I need to find the right person. Well, to a degree, yes. As I said in the beginning of the conversation, when we started talking about this topic, said that like if someone is so off, perhaps they're not compatible with you. You should not be in relationship with them. But if they have that base level that you can assess, then the rest of it, then you need to build it. It's not like there's no perfect person we can import from the Mars, let's say, and then build business with, or build life with, or you know cooperate with. So therefore, yeah, so that's another thing that I would say with regards to agreement.
Well, and if I can touch on something that you said is, well, what is the consequence of not speaking up? Because what I find is, if except if you have a very healthy relationship with your own awareness and forgiveness and are able to let things go, I normally find that they end up coming out anyway, but in the wrong way. So passive aggressive, we just throw it as a joke, but it's not really a joke, so it still comes out. So being responsible around what we want to communicate it and finding a way to do that, understanding the context and understanding what might be the consequence and what might happen with the other person if you say that. Um, but one thing, and I know we should be wrapping this up, is is to go back to what we learned in one of the coaching programs that we do in Genesis group, that is the priming. And it made me think of that. How do you, like, in the moment, ask permission to the other person to have the conversation that you want to have? And you get them to agree and sort of step in to a conversation instead of just blurting it out there, saying saying what's there for you, but the other person not even having a say in the conversation that you're about to have. So as
Mhm.
simple as saying, well,
Yes,
I want
yes,
to talk to you about this. Are you
yes,
willing
yes.
to step into that conversation?
Yes, yeah, no, that again, like it goes back to the context. See, the
Yeah.
context matters so much. I can give you examples. Like, yes, like for example, like if I observe something and then it's a friend and I'm going to have a conversation with her or him, and I'm going to say, yeah, definitely, like I'm going to say, like, see, there is this thing I want to communicate with you, but I was not sure if you want to even hear it. Like, is it okay? Would you like me to give you some feedback in this area? And like if they say yes, and then you're going to, and by the way, like it happens a lot that you do that, yet they get offended, and then like it's a common pattern. But yeah, so actually it's a polite thing to do. It's something that
Yeah.
you're doing out of respect. At the same time, there are times in our relationships, in the workplace or in society, there are clear examples that um, you don't even get to do that. So, for example, let's imagine that you're walking on the street and you're seeing a person physically, harshly um, abusing someone else.
Mm.
Yeah, you
Yes.
see it. Yeah. So now it's in the public. You're observing that, and no matter what the argument is all about, it's not acceptable for someone to, for example, physically abuse their partner on the street, isn't it? So you're not going to go to the person and say that, oh, sorry, just excuse me, we don't want to bother you. Yeah, like I'm going to prime you, and we have this feedback. Yeah, would you
Yes.
be willing to hear? So it's basically, then it depends on the context that you need to. That's why again it goes back to this art, art conversation. So art is delicate, um, and very sensible at the same time. I would say in most parts soft. Yeah, way of conveying a point. Yeah, so that's what basically you do that. So um, yeah, so or for example, like there are times that as a leader, as a manager, at the end of the day, you have authority. Yeah, and I know that some people they may react quite negatively to this authority conversation. But at the end of the day, see, if you are a manager in a team, if you're a leader in a team, and at the end of the day, like yes, you're owning the shadow parts of every team members and everything, but you're accountable in the eyes of the customer, the client. Sometimes certain misbehaviors is going to lead to massive disasters. So therefore, there you're going to pull that person away and just bring something to their attention quite assertively. Now you don't want to harm them, you don't want to make them feel bad, but they may end up feeling bad. Yeah. Now again, like again, that goes back to the art conversation because
Yeah.
sometimes we just want to react to something as a leader, like we see in the team that is not working, and it's like sometimes we are not paying enough attention that oh there are other people there. You don't necessarily humiliate that person. You don't make them feel bad deliberately. Yeah, you don't need an audience to basically get everyone involved in that conversation that you have with that person, and therefore you can take them aside, and privately you can bring certain things to their attention. uh, so you know what I mean. So therefore, like the context matters so much at the end of the day,
Yeah.
like how you convey. But to basically bring it all together before we wrap it up, I think so. Yes, so you have this. There's this moral obligation, I would say. Also, there is a practical element of it, and there are in science behind it that like keeping things to yourself and not expressing them, they don't necessarily lead to positive results. So therefore, if there is something for you to be said, you need to say it. But it doesn't mean that you need to go in and spit it, throw it out on the people's faces. So you need to find the right channels, and sometimes you need to carve the way. You need to pave the way for yourself to create that noble channel of communication. Yeah, so you can put your anger, you can put whatever you have to say, you can put it in poetry, you can put it in art, you can put it in writing. Many great bodies of work have been ignited and created um, from a fury, from something that was not really working for you, and then you could see it, you couldn't effectively communicate it, and then you found the way to actually create content around it, to bring people's attention to it, and create campaigns and influence other people's perception through that. So there are so many different ways, constructive ways that you can go about communicating what's there for you in general, than you just like rush into it and. But at the same time, there are times that see we need to dare being offensive, in the pursuit of truth, in standing by the values that you have, because the moment that you violate your own value structure, you're going to lose respect for yourself, and you don't want to live with that. That's a massive level of inauthenticity. But again, that doesn't mean that you need to constantly rush into everything. Whatever you observe, you just keep talking about it and want to fix all these problems or express all of these things at once. And yeah, and the last thing I would like to say is the power of silence. Sometimes we have these tendencies that we want to rush into things and react. Whatever happens, like we want to react to it. You see it on social media, you see it like in workplaces. Time matters in our context. Sometimes you just need to
Big time.
go beyond that impulse, that reaction, and you just need to observe it and make yourself present and deeply get what's going on, and take the time as a powerful leader to deeply get it and prepare your response to something that is happening. So it's responding rather than reacting immediately. Yeah. So yeah, so that's also there. Yeah. So,
Well, thank you, because I think this conversation is so multi-layered, and no wonder the confusion that so many of us has around
mm,
when to speak up and when not to speak up. But I think we were able to touch on some of the key
mm,
elements to consider. Does
mm,
it? Do we have a recipe for it? Absolutely not. It's an art, but there's definitely key elements that you can look at
mm,
to broaden your understanding of how to approach
yeah.
this. So thank you,
Yeah.
Ashkan.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being with us, and listening to this conversation. I hope that um, you found it beneficial. Um, and thank you very much, Lucy, for being with me. It was an enjoyable conversation. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.